is there, so why don't we do this, Dan? Is there like 3 or 4 main takeaway points? Is there a particular slide you want to point everyone to? Because we're 25 minutes into it, so we clearly can't do the regular webinar we wanted to.
Sure.
But is there a couple points or a couple slides you want to point people to really do a takeaway?
Yeah, absolutely. If I can go ahead and use the slide number, I'll go ahead and talk to those particular slides.
Yeah, do that. I'll just go on mute here. I'll leave it to you.
Very good. So if you look at slide number 1, there's a little quote by Patrick Lencioni. And this talks about the importance of, I'm hearing myself double. Sorry about that. Let me see if I can't mute myself. Well, Patrick Lencioni talks about the importance of emotional intelligence on slide number 1. It's a great quote. So in terms of what PMI is doing, go ahead and turn to slide number 3. Interestingly enough, PMI has decided that emotional intelligence is something that they want to embrace. So in doing so, we have page 310, Emerging Trends in Project Resource Management. And here's the quote from PMI. The project manager should invest in personal intelligence, emotional intelligence. Research suggests that project teams that succeed in developing team emotional intelligence are more effective. And then under the process called managing team, there's another quote. The team can use emotional intelligence to reduce tension and increase cooperation. So what is really PMI alluding to? Emotional intelligence is an attribute, a trait that every project manager really needs to go ahead and master. For those of you who are looking for certification or want to maintain your certification, more and more emotional intelligence is going to become a trend in PMI. Trust me, I've seen the new PMBOK as they're developed time and time again. They begin with a little bit of a blurb and then they expand upon it as well. So please let people know that emotional intelligence now is part of PMI and it's alive and well. Slide number 4 is the essence of emotional intelligence. And again, I apologize for the technical difficulties. I'll go through this quickly. But if anybody does have any follow-up questions, please don't be afraid to go ahead and ping me, and I'll be more than happy to go ahead and address those offline. But looking at the emotional intelligence model, and there is a little footnote on the bottom of this slide, Emotional Intelligence 2.0, Travis Bradbury and Gene Graves. Highly encourage you to go ahead and get this book. But this is what emotional intelligence is all about. A project manager or any leader needs to develop 2 areas. One is the personal competence area. And personal competence essentially has 2 pieces. One is self-awareness, and the other is self-management. In a nutshell, self-awareness. Who am I? What are the things that can emotionally get me off my game? What are the buttons that people can go ahead and push that create a person that I'm not really happy with, that render me relatively ineffective? That's the first step in emotional intelligence. The second step is self-management. Once I know myself, once I'm aware of who I am and I know those buttons that people can go ahead and push, I need to be able to manage that. If there's a certain person who makes me frustrated, makes me angry, I need to, number one, be aware of that, and I need to be able to deal with that. I can't allow them to go ahead and get me off my game, so to speak, because if I do, then I'm not going to be an effective leader, an effective manager, and chances are I'm going to have a lot of issues in terms of managing my team. Once you self-manage yourself, once you're able to go ahead and separate yourself from all of the frustrations, all of those external noise factors that can impact you negatively, we go into the social competence area, social awareness. Now that I'm aware of myself and I'm able to manage myself, I'm not concerned with who I am and what I'm doing and what my actions are. I'm not concerned that I'm doing the wrong thing. Now I'm able to look externally. I'm able to go ahead and read people. I'm able to go ahead and see the things that are happening around me. And when I do that, knowing myself, controlling myself, and now aware of what is occurring on the external, now the fourth part of this, I can better manage relationships. And if you can better manage relationships, I suggest that that is going to help you overall in project management. Now, there are a number of different slides that talk about these four areas. And slide number 5 talks about self-awareness. I'm just going to refer to the middle area. How do you know that you've achieved self-awareness? It says high ability. You are clear about what you do well, what motivates you, what satisfies you, which people and situations push your buttons. Know yourself. Slide number 6 talks about self-management. Here's the overall gist of this. The fourth bullet, high ability. Walk through adversity without cracking. Success is realized by putting needs on hold and managing responses productively. And that is really the key to self-management. How can I manage my responses productively? If you look at the what looks like, Sanjay is the picture of patience and understanding during heated and emotionally charged meetings. He responds with equanimity and wisdom. That's what you aspire to. Don't let people push your buttons. Don't let people pull your cord. Don't let people get you off your game. Going to the third area, social awareness. I like this definition, high ability. Like an anthropologist, you observe others in their natural state without letting those feelings disturb the observation. In other words, you filter out yourself and allow what others are doing to come in. You can spot and understand people's emotions when you're in the middle of it. You are contributing yet astutely aware member of the interaction. And the last piece of this is relationship management. High ability, clear communication, and effective handling of conflict makes the most of interaction with others. Let's take a look at that high ability aspect from a project manager standpoint. Do project managers strive for clear communication? According to the project management body of knowledge, communication is 90% of everything that we do. Effective handling of conflict, is that a key project management skill? Absolutely. Interactions with others, absolutely critical. You can have the greatest project management plan in the world. You can have your scope well-defined, your schedule well-defined, your cost well-defined. But if you don't manage the people are going to manage you. And unfortunately, the best laid plans of mice and men often go astray. I created slide number 9 just off the top of my head, so to speak. From a project management standpoint, what are some reasons to improve your emotional intelligence? By the way, if you see this EQ, EQ stands for emotional intelligence. I don't know why, but that's how it is. But some of the different areas in project management, stakeholder management, stakeholders, those individuals interested or impacted by your project. Good emotional intelligence is going to allow you to gain commitment and support of key project stakeholders. Managing change. I'm sure you're all aware as project managers of the term scope creep. Everybody and their brother and sister is doing things around you. They're creating new functionality. They're changing the scope, the time, the schedule. They're making promises that unfortunately you're going to have to go ahead and keep. One of the things that you can do with good emotional intelligence is motivate stakeholders to work within the system through that good relationship development. Effective communications. One of the key aspects of good effective communications, if you take any class in effective communication states, know your audience, know who you are dealing with. If you're able to separate yourself from yourself, that sounds strange, but I'm not so focused internally, I'm now focused externally, you're going to have a better understanding of who that audience is, what's driving their commitment, their motivations, and to better be able to target your communication. One of the things that project managers need to consistently do is manage resources. And one of the most important resources that you need to manage are people. How do you gain their commitment? How do you get them motivated? How do you get them moving in the right direction? Key interpersonal skills of a project manager, negotiation, influencing, these can all be positively impacted by emotional intelligence as well. And in quality, if any of you have ever read the project management body of knowledge, it says quality wants to do two things. Number one, conform to requirements and strive for open and honest fit for use. Open and honest fit for use. What does that mean? Having the people actually explaining what they really need, not giving you solutions, and being able to have that honest and open conversation and what do you really need and what is the value that I can go ahead and provide. As I was thinking through, because I'm reviewing the new PMBOK now, there are probably another 15 or 20 bullets that I could have easily put in. But there is a real reason why PMI has said project managers need emotional intelligence. If you can just improve yourself in these 5 areas on slide number 9, I think you're well ahead of the game. So now, slide number 10 says you need an action plan. It's great to talk about emotional intelligence. It's great to talk about self-awareness leads to self-management. Self-management leads to social awareness. Social awareness leads to better relationships. But how can you do it? So what you want to do is to take a look at the little PDF file that has been provided to you and start slow. There's an old saying that says, don't boil the ocean. Don't try to boil the ocean. In other words, if you try to improve yourself in all 4 of these areas, you're going to fail miserably. If any of you have ever studied the Kanban methodology, one of the reasons why Kanban is so popular these days is because it allows you to limit the work in progress. Well, I encourage you to limit your work in progress. Start small. Pick a few areas from some of the areas where you think you need the most help and see if you can go ahead and master it. I know we're short on time, but I want to share with you some of the different strategies that you can come up with. There are self-awareness strategies, and you'll notice on slide number 12, if you can get to slide number 12, I have 2 of them in red. Know who and what pushes your buttons and watch yourself like a hawk. These are 2 areas that I embarked upon in terms of my journey to improve my emotional intelligence. Know who and what pushes your buttons. In the past, I've had people who go ahead and push my buttons pretty well. And it ended up in terms of my actions that I was not happy with. I was less than effective. So I actually sat down with a list of my key people that I deal with, and I wrote a little note in terms of, here's what they can do that knock me off my game. And then once I came up with that list, I watched myself like a hawk. What does that mean? I made sure that if any of these negative activities, negative responses that were frustrating me were happening, I would try to catch myself in midstream. That was my 2 initial steps in self-awareness. Slide number 13 provides some self-management strategies. I picked 2 of these to master as well. Count to 10. If someone makes me angry, if someone frustrates me, or if I'm about to go ahead and do something that I'm going to regret, I simply mentally count to 10. And I count to 10, and at the end of 10, I ask myself, do I still want to go ahead and do what I wanted to do? And if the answer is yes, I do it. But in most cases, the answer is no, keep your cool. And learn a valuable lesson from everyone you encounter. There are 2 types of examples, the positive example, and we can all learn from positive examples. But I think the most compelling example that we can learn from is the negative example. If you see someone exhibiting negative behavior, instead of allowing that negative behavior to translate into negative behavior from you, learn from that individual, see what that negative behavior and the effects of it were on others, and make a mental note to yourself to not do that on your own. I also picked a few from social awareness. Greet people by name. It's interesting, but we all have different personalities. And my personality is very analytical and very structural, which means I'm the kind of person who likes to cut to the chase. And I am not uncomfortable with walking into a room, walking into a meeting, and just cutting to the chase. But many, many people are much more social than I am. So I make a concerted effort to just say hello to people and greet them by name and at least spend a couple of seconds asking how they are. And that really helps me to generate better relationships. And the other one that I put in red, practice the art of listening. I have a tendency sometimes to speak over people, to interrupt, to not allow people to complete their sentences. That is very rude. It's very frustrating for the other individual. And when I catch myself doing it, I get very frustrated about myself. So I try to really listen before I speak. And there are two other areas I chose in relationship management as well. It's not all about me. So one of the things that I try to do is empathize. I try to put myself in the other person's shoes and acknowledge their feelings. Sometimes they're unhappy about something. So I acknowledge that. It doesn't mean that we're not going to have to move forward, but if we acknowledge that unhappiness, it allows people to vent a little bit and then move forward to do something positive. And again, I'm going to go back to my basic personality, very analytical, very much to the point kind of individual. Oftentimes I'm very autocratic. I do things and I don't explain why I'm doing them. A lot of people want to know why we're doing things, not just what we're doing. So these are 4 areas that are in emotional intelligence, and these are what I chose. Now, choose the same ones that I did? No. But here's what I encourage you to go ahead and do. On page number 16, and I know I'm going through this very quickly, but again, technical difficulties, which I will fix the next time I come on Web Ninja. I'm going to give myself a little tutorial on this. I chose a new computer to use because my old computer wasn't working well and I paid the price. Choose an EQ mentor. This is slide number 16. Find someone who is gifted in your chosen EI or EQ skill. Ask this person if he or she is willing to offer you feedback and guidance at regular intervals during your journey. So this is what this means. Find a partner and find a friend and share with them, these are the 2 things that I want to do. And I'm going to go ahead and try them now. I encourage you to begin with self-awareness, then move to self-management, then use the social awareness, then move to relationship management, because they're all dependent upon each other. But find a friend and ask them, how am I doing? Am I improving? How would you encourage me, or what advice could you give me so that I can improve in these areas? But then return the favor to that other individual and act as their mentor. Help each other. And I think you're going to find that you can improve this area as well. So Bill, I tried to get through this as very rapidly as possible, and hopefully I didn't bore people to tears.
No, I again appreciate that you were able to send the material early and everyone can download the material. So everyone's got the material. A lot of people said that they downloaded it. So what I would suggest is maybe we kind of open it up for questions. I definitely get to reverb. Yeah. So, folks, you can you won't be able to talk clearly, but you can go onto the chat. So, is there any particular slide or is there anything you want Dan to cover? And again, we apologize tremendously for the issue with the slides and showing the screen, but we'll have Dan back. He's got lots of material he can cover, so we'll have him back, and we will definitely get this straightened out. Any questions
Bill and I
at
will
all?
practice, trust me, once I get this new computer updated.
That's okay. People understand technology problems. Any questions, folks? Anything you want Dan to cover? Okay. When it's pretty quiet, there's still a ton of people on. John, William, Douglas. Any questions? Anything you guys want Dan to cover? I know he went through it quick, but that's why we were able to give you the material. Oh, good. Ella. Awesome. Yeah, definitely a lot to think about. Emotional intelligence is a critical part of running projects, as Dan was indicating. Okay, guys, we're not going to spend too much longer on here. If you guys don't have questions for us, like I said, you've got Dan on. He's ready to provide. Okay. All right, going once. Okay. There you go, Dan. Do you have an example of a team that wasn't clicking and you used some of these techniques and it improved?
Yeah, that's really a great question, and absolutely. There have been a number of occasions where, as a consultant, as a project manager, I have picked up some projects in midstream. And one of the things that I have tried to do initially is to really use what my grandmother told me a long time ago. You have two ears and you have two eyes and you have one mouth. So watch twice, listen twice, and speak once. I have, unfortunately, and I won't name the company, but it's near and dear to Bill and myself on a number of occasions, had an opportunity to pick up projects in midstream. And I have quickly noticed that the team is not working together. They're not pulling together. So I applied one of the 8 strategies that I had: listen and watch. And as you see different people, you can slowly but surely see what their motives are. You can learn an awful lot about them. And by working through this particular model, being aware of who I am and managing myself and really being socially aware, I'm able to go ahead and address these issues individual by individual. And another recommendation that I had for myself to understand my feelings, but also understand the other individual's feelings, I sat down with the team members one by one and I asked them, what do you think about this project? If you were me, what would you go ahead and do? How do you feel about this project? Are there any things that are bothering you? Is there anything that we can do to go ahead and move this project ahead? But by divorcing myself and worrying about myself, so to speak, it's not about me, it's about the other individuals. By being socially aware, I was able to go ahead and develop those relationships. So yes, and my recommendation, if you have a dysfunctional team, is look and watch and listen before you speak, and then address the issues with each individual and understand what their feelings are and see what you can do to improve the relationship and move forward and get them all working together. So long answer to a short question, but yes, it really does work, but it does take time. It doesn't happen overnight.
Sorry, that's awesome. Dan, another question. How would you manage this situation? During a project meeting, one participant talked some unprofessional and wrong information, ignored comments from other people and leaders. Wants to continue. To avoid loss of time, someone trying to interrupt. Finally, person complains that shortage of right. So, can you see that comment?
Yeah, yes, I do there from Natalia, and that's a very, very good one as well. This is the traditional, someone wants to hijack your meeting and they're not being really professional about it as well. Again, let's walk through this particular model. Number one, self-awareness. To be perfectly honest, it's going to make me angry and it's going to frustrate me, and I'm going to want to go ahead and say something negative as well. Why? Because I'm a human being. However, I'm not going to let that occur. So now I'm going to go to social awareness, or to self-management. And I'm going to manage myself. I'm not going to let this individual's negative behavior go ahead and throw me off. I'm going to listen for a very, very short time, and I'm going to try to determine their intent. But now I'm going to go into social awareness and relationship management. Now, looking at the scenario, it says during the project meeting, one participant talks some unprofessional and wrong information and ignores comments from other people. I'm going to acknowledge their feelings. I'm going to empathize with them. I'm going to let them know I really appreciate your input. I really appreciate what you're talking about. But at this particular time, I'm going to go ahead and put this in something called a parking lot. And if you're familiar with what the parking lot is, I'm going to write down what their thoughts are and let this individual know we're going to go ahead and get back to this a little bit later. However, I need your cooperation and I need your support to go ahead and continue because we need to get through the agenda. So I'm trying to show respect to an individual who's being disrespectful, but I'm also sending a very, very strong message that this behavior is not going to be tolerated. We're going to talk offline. I'm going to acknowledge the fact that you need to talk about this, but we're going to go ahead and move forward. Now, another way that we can do this as well is to use a little bit of emotional intelligence up front and set some ground rules as well. I don't know if any of you are familiar with agile project management, but one of the best ways to go ahead and combat a potential individual who wants to hijack your meeting in a potentially negative way is to use the ball methodology. And you set this ground rule right up front. If you're holding the ball, you speak. If you're not holding the ball, you listen. If you want the ball, raise your hand and I'll go ahead and flip the ball to you and you can speak. But you have 30 seconds to go ahead and state what you want, and then you have to pass the ball to someone else. So another long answer to a short question.
Oh, that was awesome. Hey, Dan, what do you do with a dysfunctional boss?
That's a great question. Well, update my resume. Kidding there. No, I'm half serious. But if you got a dysfunctional boss, again, this is where the first two aspects of emotional intelligence, self-awareness and self-management, really come into play. And you really need to go ahead and do the best you can to put yourself into the boss's shoes and try to understand exactly what their point of view is. This social awareness. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to agree with their point of view. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to want to go ahead and move forward. You may vehemently disagree. But it's very, very important using your emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and self-management. I don't want to go ahead and show my disagreement. I don't want to show my frustration. And you may want to use what we call the PNP methodology with a dysfunctional boss. P means positive. Well, you know, that's really a great idea. Boss, I really appreciate your insight. Yeah, you've really given me something to think about. And even if you totally disagree with what they're saying, you go, you're not making a commitment. But yeah, this is something really some good food for thought. Then here's the end. This is where you go ahead and use the negative, so to speak, but you try not to be negative. You know, I hear what you're saying, and I think that if we were able to use what you have, but maybe modify it a little bit, here's the last P. We can go from really good to great as well. So acknowledge, don't commit political suicide, but in addition, make sure that in a very respectful way, without shooting the messenger, that you get your ideas in. Dysfunctional bosses, unfortunately, they're alive and well, and there are many of them. But I found that start out positive, interject your ideas, but then through your ideas, share how you can mutually go to that next level. Sometimes you're able to go ahead and overcome those negatives. But you need to, again, be that good listener. Watch twice, listen twice, speak once. And those first two, self-awareness and self-management, the worst things you can do with a dysfunctional boss is to allow that boss to make you dysfunctional. Watch
That's
yourself
awesome.
like a hawk.
Yeah, it's a good one. Should we put business benefits ahead of relationships or not? Should we put business benefits
Yes and
ahead
no.
of relationships?
As a matter of fact, there is a little something called the balanced scorecard. And the balanced scorecard was created by the Harvard School of Business. There are 4 areas in the balanced scorecard. And in terms of presenting, in terms of negotiating, in terms of influencing, there are 4 things that you really need to get right. One of them is the business aspect of effectiveness, making money, making profit, the financial aspect. That's very, very important. As a matter of fact, the majority of people want to find out what is the value proposition? How can we be effective? A second area is process, efficiency, and that's a business aspect of it as well. And the efficiency piece says that we have to be lean, we have to do things quickly, we have to go ahead and do things with the minimal resources. But a third aspect is more relational, the customer. And one of the ways that I've been able to deal with a dysfunctional boss or get someone to think a little bit more about the people aspects when they're not a people person is talking a little bit about the customer. Here's what the customer needs. I've had some conversations with these individuals. As a matter of fact, a great way to go ahead and turn around a boss who's not necessarily people focused is to get some customer testimonials. But the last piece of the balanced scorecard is the employee. And you have to really be able to show that I can have the best business plan in the world. I can have customers. I can have the best process. But if I don't have all of the people moving in the right direction, the same direction, and pulling toward that end result, we're going to go ahead and fail. So in response to your question, it's really a yes or no. You really need to incorporate all aspects of it. And a successful business includes not just how you do it, not just what you're doing, not just your customers, but the people who are doing it as well. So you really want to focus on all four of those areas and let the individual know that nothing's going to happen unless these four areas are working perfectly in sync.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thanks, Dan. That was awesome advice. Okay, guys, we got about 4 minutes left. Is there any last things that you want Dan to cover? Any last questions for Dan? How to make any advice on how to make 2 or more arch enemies collaborate on a project? That's a great question.
Wow, what a great question as well. Well, goal number 1, if it's possible to separate them and put them on other projects, that's great, but sometimes you just can't do that. So now we go into conflict management. And conflict management has 5 different areas. And one of the methods that you want to employ, and again, this requires some really great emotional intelligence because you need to be self-aware, you need to be self-managing, and you need to be socially aware. It's called the smoothing methodology. So here's what smoothing is. Before you get the 2 people together, have some one-on-one conversations. One conversation with one of the individuals, one conversation with the other individual, and try to find out what their motives are, what their interests are, what their desires are, possibly even acknowledge the fact that they don't like the other individual and that other individual doesn't like them. And without taking sides, try to go ahead and peel that onion and find out what is the real source of the conflict. Make good notes. Once you've completed these 2 interviews with these 2 individuals, try to find something that they have in common. Try to find an interest that they share. Now, bring these 2 people together and key in on this interest. Let's just say that it's Bob and Sally. Say, Bob, true or false? This is something that's important to you. This is something that you're moving forward on. This is something that you want to achieve. Bob will say, yeah, that's right. I already told you that. Sally, what I just shared with Bob, isn't that important to you? Isn't this something that you want to go ahead and move forward on? You get this agreement. You get them to initially agree that this is something that if we cooperate, we can graduate and we can move forward on, and it can be to our mutual benefit. And hopefully you can act as a mediator and keep people focused on, let's work together and move toward this goal. One of the aspects of good good emotional intelligence is it's not about the people. It's not about my feelings. I can like you or I can dislike you, but we can still be productive and move forward. So be that mediator. But I highly recommend that you use this smoothing methodology to begin it. And hopefully you can go ahead and get these people moving forward. Now, they may fall back. And if they do, you may want to go ahead and go back to square number 1 and smooth them over again.
That's awesome. All right, and that's a great way to end it. Thank you all very much, guys. Thank you again, Dan, for joining. We will be back in the new year with live webinars. We will definitely have Dan back. We'll do a system test and make sure everything worked out well, but that's fine. Thank you all again for joining. Have a great day, and we will talk to you all soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. And what I'm going to do now, effective from 10 o'clock, is I'm going to go to Google Chrome and get this thing downloaded so I don't have an issue again.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.